Chapter 4, video number 14. We're going to carry on talking about the overtime checker. Now we typed out the code and we want to basically run through and have a look at how this works. So I'm going to compile it and let's have a look. So I'm going to type in some data like 30 and $10 and I'm expecting 300. Great. If I type in 40 and 10, I'm expecting 400. But if I type in 41, I'm expecting 415. Perfect. So you can see that it's working fairly well. But again, if I type in 10 and click on wage, my error handling kicks in and says invalid wage or rate entry. And that will prompt the user. Now when I click OK, I don't want to just leave it in its error state. The user typed in error and they may not know what they even did wrong. So by clicking OK, it actually clears this text box out, clears this, and it sets the focus back into here. So if you remember from the previous video, what we did was if they did make an error and we caught the error, it would clean out those two text boxes and then it runs this extra method right here. It's called a focus. And the focus, it does something, so it's a method, and it says let's put the focus back into the weekly text box. And that would be, this is the weekly text box right here in the application. So what we're doing here is we're just doing a little bit of user friendly feature here, I call it, and to help the user pick up where they left off. If they've made an error, so let's try to help them somewhat in allowing them to type the data back in. Alright, so that's a little bit about the error handling on that. Now the next thing I want to do is I'm going to actually do a debug on this one, and by doing a debug I'm going to put it on breakpoint here at line 144 on my code, and which is just under the declare. So when it compiles and it runs, so if I type in, let's say 50 hours at $10 and click on wage, the computer stops and the yellow icon arrow here says here, this is where the pointer where it stopped. And when you roll your mouse over this stuff, it actually pops up and it gives you a little tool tip on how this works. Now we could step through our program by pushing the F11 key, or we can use this one up here. I'm going to push the F11 key. So I push F11, it moves to the next code. So it says let's declare a variable here, let's declare this one, declare wage, and declare overtime. So what happened in the memory is it set up those variable types. And down here you'll notice that it says overtime rate is set at value 1.5. And there's also the weekly text box. So what you're seeing here in this autos window down here is a list of all the values that are getting set up. And this is really important later on when we're trying to debug our code. Now in this example here, we know we put in 50, and in fact if I roll my mouse over here you can actually see it says 50 right there. In fact I could pin that, and I could take this one and I could run across here and pin that one, and then when I'm looking, I know it's 50 and I know it's 10 and it's in quotation, so it's a string. The hours is now a number, so if I click this, I know that that 50 was converted into a 50 in decimal, and this was a 10, and you can see here I'm just pinning those, so that's all good. Now the hours is in a number state, and so is overtime. So to ask yourself the question, is hours 50 greater than 40? And that will equate down to, now if I click on, I can just pin each of those. I really don't need to pin that because it doesn't equate. Now by pressing the F11 key, it said that was true. So this equated to true, so it's going to execute this block of text. Now it takes 50 minus 40. You can do the math in your head. 50 more, the overtime should equal 10. So I click the F11 key, it says yeah, it's 10. Okay, perfect. So now I've got the overtime at 40 multiplied by the pay of 10, plus I have to multiply the 10 times the pay times the overtime, which gives me my total amount of wages, and the wages will become $550. Perfect. But $550 is a decimal, and I need a number. So what that does is it puts it back into a string, and it puts it in as a decimal financial currency with 2 decimal places. Alright, so that's kind of a very quick walkthrough with the debug, and we'll come back